There's a box of takeout menus stuck to a great many refrigerators tonight, and a phone in a great many hands, thumb hovering over the button that orders a pizza for far more money than anybody wants to admit out loud. And I want to ask you something before you press that button. I want to ask you to open your cupboard instead, because I am willing to bet that in that cupboard, right now, this very minute, you have a bag of rice and a carton of eggs. And I am here to tell you, plainly and without exaggeration, that those two humble things, put together the right way, will make you a supper better than any pizza that ever came to your door in a cardboard box. Now, I know how that sounds. I know pizza has a hold on people. The cheese pulling in strings, the smell of it filling up the whole house, the crust with its char on the edges. I'm not going to sit here and tell you pizza is bad or that you are foolish for loving it. What I'm going to tell you is that rice and eggs, cooked with a little care and a little know-how, gives you everything pizza gives you and more, for a tenth of the price, in a tenth of the time, using things you already own. And I do not say that lightly. I say it because I have made this dish more nights than I have not for years now, and I have never once sat there afterward wishing I had ordered out instead. That is not a small claim. That is a dish that has earned its place at my table night after night, and I want it to earn its place at yours. Let me tell you how I came to this dish, because it did not start as some clever trick I dreamed up. It started the way a lot of good plain food starts, which is out of necessity and out of a refrigerator that did not have much in it. I remember the nights early on when the money was thin and the cupboard was thinner, and pizza was not even a question worth asking because it simply was not in the budget, not even the frozen kind from the grocery store. But rice was always there. Rice is cheap and it keeps forever and it fills you up. And eggs, well, eggs were the one thing I could always manage, a carton of them lasting a week, feeding me morning and night if it had to. So I put the two together out of plain necessity, the way people have done in kitchens all over the world for longer than pizza has even existed. And what I found, to my genuine surprise, was that I was not eating a consolation meal. I was not settling. I was eating something I actually looked forward to, something that tasted better the more I made it and the more I understood it. What began as making do became, over time, a dish I chose on purpose, even on the nights when I could have afforded anything else in the world. That is the real test of a dish, is it not? Not whether it fills a gap when you have nothing else, but whether you keep reaching for it once you have every choice available to you. And I keep reaching for this one. Almost every single day, if I am honest with you. Before I show you exactly how I make it, I want to say one quick thing. There is a great deal more where this came from. A whole collection of dishes built on this same principle of simple, cheap things made extraordinary. And I have gathered the fullest version of it together in one place at eliasyoder.com. If that is ever something you want to have in your hands, I will not mention it again. Let us get to the rice and the eggs, for that is what you came here for. The first thing to understand, and this is the thing most people get wrong before they even begin, is that the rice matters more than people think. You cannot take a pot of rice cooked hours ago, gone cold and clumped together in the refrigerator, and expect it to behave the same way as rice cooked fresh and hot. And here is the trick of it, the thing that took me a long while to learn properly. Day-old rice, rice that has sat in the cold overnight, is actually better for this dish than rice cooked fresh that same hour. That sounds backward, I know, but there is real sense in it. Rice fresh off the stove is soft and wet and clings together in a sticky mass, and when you try to fry it, it turns to mush in the pan, a gummy tangle that will not separate no matter how you stir it. But rice that has rested overnight in the cold has dried out just slightly, the grains have firmed up and pulled apart from one another, and that rice will fry up loose and light, each grain separate and golden, taking on a little char here and there the way good fried rice ought to. So if you can plan a night ahead, cook your rice the evening before and let it sit covered in the refrigerator until the next day. And if you cannot plan ahead, which happens to the best of us, there is still a way to manage, and I will show you that too. But keep this in your mind as the first rule of the dish. Old rice fries, fresh rice steams and sticks. That single fact will save you more disappointing pans of mush than almost anything else I could tell you. Now, if you find yourself with only fresh rice, do not despair, for there is a fix. You spread the hot rice out thin on a plate or a wide tray, not piled up in a bowl where the steam has nowhere to go, and you let it sit uncovered for 20 minutes or so, or you put it in the freezer for 10, spread out that same way. What you are doing is chasing off some of that extra moisture in a hurry, mimicking what a night in the refrigerator would have done slowly. It is not quite as good as the real overnight rest, but it will get you close enough, and it will save your pan from turning into paste. Either way, before that rice goes anywhere near the hot pan, you want to break it up with your fingers or the back of a spoon, so there are no great clumps left, just loose separate grains ready to take on heat. Now, a word on the pan, for it matters here just as it matters in anything fried properly. You want it wide and you want it hot, a good heavy skillet or a wok if you have one. For a narrow, crowded pan will only steam your rice instead of frying it, and steamed rice is a sad, soft thing with none of the character we are after. Get that pan good and hot before anything goes into it. A few drops of water should dance and skitter across the surface if you flick them in to test it. That is how you know it is ready. We begin, as with so many good things, with the eggs, though not quite the way you might expect. You crack 2 or 3 eggs into a bowl and beat them loose with a fork. Nothing fancy, just enough that the yolks and whites are friends with one another. Into the hot pan they go with a little oil, and you let them cook just until they are barely set, still soft and glossy, and then you break them into big loose curds with your spatula and tip them straight back out onto a plate. Set them aside. Do not cook them through all the way, for they will finish cooking later, back in the pan, with everything else, and if you cook them hard now, they will turn to rubber by the time the dish is done. This is the trick that separates a good egg fried rice from a poor one, cooking the eggs first and gently, and folding them back in at the end, so every curd stays tender and rich, rather than scrambling them hard into the rice from the start, where they turn tough and dry and lost among the grains. That same hot pan, with whatever oil and egg is left clinging to it, is where the aromatics go next, for they are the thing that will carry through the whole dish just as the onion and garlic carried the beef in that other supper I taught you. A bit of garlic minced fine, and if you have a scallion, the white parts chopped, going into the hot oil first, just long enough to turn fragrant and golden, no more than 30 seconds or so, for garlic burns quick and turns bitter if you look away from it. You want it just barely coloring, filling the kitchen with that smell that makes anybody walking by ask what is cooking. Now the rice goes in, that cold, dry, separated rice, spread out across the pan in as wide a layer as you can manage, and here is where patience pays you back again, the same as it does with any good frying. You let it sit, mostly undisturbed, for a minute or so at a time, so the bottom layer touching the hot metal can actually brown and crisp rather than just warming through limp and pale. Folks who stir their rice constantly from the moment it hits the pan never get that little bit of char, that toasted flavor along the edges of the grains, which is honestly half of what makes fried rice worth eating in the first place. So let it sit, let it catch a little color here and there, then toss it, let it sit again, and toss it again, working in patient stages rather than one long anxious stir the whole time through. Season as you go, and season generously, for rice on its own is bland and needs real help to come alive. A good pour of soy sauce, poured around the edges of the pan rather than straight over the top, so it sizzles against the hot metal and toasts slightly before it ever touches the rice, which deepens its flavor considerably. A pinch of salt, for the soy alone will not always be enough. White pepper if you have it, for it carries a different kind of warmth than black pepper does, and it is worth having in your cupboard for dishes exactly like this one. And if you like a little richness, a small spoonful of oyster sauce, or a few drops of sesame oil stirred through at the end works wonders, though neither is strictly necessary if you do not have them. This is a forgiving dish, and it wants to work with whatever your kitchen holds. Once the rice has taken on that toasted color and the seasoning is worked evenly through every grain, tasting as you go and adjusting as needed, you fold those soft curds of egg back in, breaking them gently among the grains so every bite carries a bit of that tender richness. A final scatter of scallion greens, chopped fine, tossed through at the very last moment off the heat, gives it a bright, fresh bite against all that warm, savory rice. And there it is, a pan of golden, glistening rice, each grain separate and touched with a little char, threaded through with soft ribbons of egg, bright with scallion, savory clear through to the bottom of the bowl. You do not need a plate for this. You eat it straight from the pan if you are alone, or you spoon it out into bowls if there are others at your table, and either way it disappears fast, faster than you would think a bowl of rice and eggs has any right to disappear. That is the whole trick of the dish laid bare. Two of the cheapest, most ordinary things sitting in any kitchen, treated with a little patience and a little heat, turning into something you actually crave. And like any good, honest dish, this one bends to whatever your kitchen holds, which is a mark of a dish built to be cooked often, rather than only on special occasions. If you have a handful of frozen peas and carrots, toss them into the pan just before the rice goes in, letting them warm through and add a bit of color and sweetness. A bit of leftover ham or bacon, diced small and crisped in the pan before the garlic turns it heartier still, though it is not the least bit necessary. A splash of chili oil or a spoonful of chili crisp at the end for those who like a little heat. Any vegetable going soft in your crisper drawer, chopped fine and cooked along with the aromatics, will only make it better and keep it from going to waste, which is thrift doing double duty, feeding you well and wasting nothing. I have made this dish with almost nothing in it beyond the rice and the egg and the soy sauce, and I have made it dressed up with whatever was left in the refrigerator at the end of the week, and I have never once made a bad pan of it. That is a rare thing for a dish to promise, and this one keeps that promise every time. Now let me say a plain word about why this dish beats pizza, and I mean that in the fullest sense, not just in flavor, but in everything a meal is meant to give you. A pizza asks you to wait, whether that waiting is for a delivery driver fighting through traffic or for an oven to heat up to some enormous temperature it was never quite built to reach at home. This dish asks for 10 minutes, start to finish, if your rice is already made and waiting in the refrigerator. A pizza costs you real money, more of it than people like to add up, honestly, between the pie itself and the tip and the fee tacked onto the fee. This dish costs you rice you already own and eggs you already own, a few cents worth of soy sauce. Nothing more. A pizza, eaten too often, leaves you heavy and a little regretful, weighed down with cheese and dough and grease. This dish leaves you satisfied without that heaviness, for eggs and rice done properly nourish you the way real food is meant to nourish, filling but not punishing. And there is a kind of quiet pride in it, too, in knowing you made something good with your own two hands out of almost nothing rather than handing your money to a stranger and waiting by the window. I want to be plain about who profits from you believing a good, satisfying meal has to come from a box or a delivery bag. There is a great deal of money in convenience, in the fees stacked on fees, in making a simple thing feel like too much trouble to bother with yourself. Nobody is plotting against you in some smoky room, planning to keep you from your own stovetop. It is worse than that in its way. It is only a slow drift, the same drift that took the old thrifty skills out of so many kitchens, until folks came to believe that a bag of rice and a carton of eggs, sitting right there in their own cupboard, could not possibly add up to a real supper. But it always could. It always can. The proof of it is a pan of golden fried rice disappearing off the stove faster than any pizza ever did, night after night, in my own kitchen, and it can be the same in yours. Now tell me something down in the comments. What is the dish in your kitchen that you would put up against anything a restaurant could deliver to your door? The one you make so often it has become second nature, the one that quietly beats every expensive alternative without you ever having to say a word about it. I would dearly love to hear what it is. Next time, I am going to show you one of the great forgotten suppers of the old country kitchen, and one that turns a single humble potato into a meal that tastes far richer than it has any right to. No fryer, no fuss, just a pan, a potato, and a little bit of wisdom passed down the way it always used to be. Next time, the potato that eats like a feast. Until then, keep a cupboard stocked with rice and eggs, and keep a kitchen that knows a simple thing, cooked with a little care, beats a costly thing every single time.